we're introducing a world that will ultimately become quite important to the future of the MCU.
So that was a lie.
I'm sure you've forgotten about this movie. It's been 3 years and Marvel hasn't revisited any of these characters or any world building it brings, so I can't blame you if you did. Werewolf by Night was a risk for Marvel, an actual art piece within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, telling a story while the director has free reign to make a cinematic homage to a classic horror movies like The Werewolf from 1956, which obviously this is very inspired by. And also the director flat out said how he considered having cameos and connections, but wanted to stick to the story he wanted to tell in the artistic way he wanted to present it, not just make this feel like build up to something else. But Marvel's biggest audience are people who only care about cameos, big action, and cinematic events. So a black and white horror film on a mostly unknown character was already a cause of lack of viewing. While writing this, I literally had to explain to a friend how a black and white art piece can still be a good movie even though it's black and white, and he can wrap his head around how not having color could still be watchable. But also take into account that this came out just after Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, Moon Knight, Ms. Marvel, Thor Love and Thunder, and She-Hulk. People were already being driven away after all these misses. It's a shame because this was something fresh we've never seen before in the MCU. Everything else is just so quippy and safe. The film starts with a recreation of a classic film title card, before giving us a quick background onto the monster side of the MCU. This explanation starts with an image of the Avengers. This is the only real connection to the MCU within this film. Without this, technically there's nothing more than just saying it's connected that actually makes it connected, due to these characters never being brought back for any other projects, and are unlikely to show up in anything anytime soon. I don't really see my boy Werewolf by Night 1v1ing Doctor Doom. The reason for the image of the Avengers is more than just a point to the camera, I know those guys! It gives you an example of what you do know in this world, and tells you what you haven't seen yet. These monsters and creatures that also live in this world. But this image of the original six has an issue that the MCU still has to this day. At this point, this is a decade and a half old team, and they haven't been able to give a spotlight to anyone else since. These characters, which half their stories have already ended, are still the face of the MCU. But this isn't anything to do with Werewolf by Night, so I'll stop yapping. We learn about the Bloodstone family and how they own a weapon called the Bloodstone. Very creative naming on their part, I know. The Bloodstone is in need of a new owner due to Ulysses Bloodstone's death. Now we know the gist of the story. Quick side note. This was released in 2022, but in 2023 they released an in-color version of the film, undoubtedly to try and persuade more people to watch it because of the initial lack of viewings. But does this not go against the director's vision of the film? It was a homage to classic horror movies that he grew up on. Michael Giacchino was the director of Werewolf by Night, and this was his first ever directing gig. He is also known for composing just a shit ton of movies you've definitely seen. A month after Werewolf by Night, a documentary called Directed by Night was released, where Anthony Giacchino followed his brother Michael on him directing his first film, and throughout we learn about his background and how he grew up loving movies, made his own as a kid, all the classic director stuff. It's an interesting watch if you're interested in movies and the making of and directing and such, but if you're only here for superheroes and action and that, I wouldn't recommend it. But what I'm getting at is that we see that he cares about what he's making. He hasn't just chucked a filter on top to make it look interesting because it's black and white now. He purposefully chose shots and lighting with black and white stylistic choice in mind. It was still shot digitally. I'm sure he didn't really have a choice in that, and it's just easier and more reliable with new technologies instead of, whipping out an old ass vintage camera. But due to this, Marvel can and did just go, fuck it, make it color now. Kids love color. But what's dumb is when they re-released it in color, they still put an old camera filter on top. If you're gonna ruin the film by adding the color back, at least just give us the film in 4K and then we can at least see it in good quality. Now I'm gonna be hypocritical though, because throughout I'm gonna use the color version, because obviously as we've seen, people love color and are scared of black and white, so I ain't gonna risk that for my own sake. We follow our main character Jack Russell, aka the Werewolf by Night, as he enters the Bloodstone Manor. He looks at all the monsters' heads on the walls, trophies that the Bloodstone family have hunted and mounted. Seeing the vampire looking fucker just makes me sad we haven't seen the Blade film yet. We meet the rest of the characters, Viking Guy, Jeffree Star and the other ones, and eventually Alyssa Bloodstone, our other main character. Both Alyssa and Werewolf by Night have some interesting stories in the comics, but this type of story, just an hour-long special, is a perfect form to introduce these types of characters. An 8-episode TV show about Alyssa Bloodstone would just be too much, and no one's watching a movie about her, let's just be honest. Marvel needs to make more of these special presentations about these characters we haven't seen yet, and then make a film where a bunch of them team up. Oh, I don't know, like a Midnight Suns or something. Crazy idea, I know. I also think Moon Knight should have had an hour-long special instead of the TV show he had. I'll make a video about that maybe sometime, I don't know. I digress. If Marvel didn't fuck everything up at this point, they could have had a Werewolf by Night, Man-Thing, Alyssa Bloodstone, Moon Knight, Doctor Strange, and a Blade. Chuck in a Ghost Rider special, and boom, Midnight Suns film cast ready. We can only dream. Like, I can only dream that you can subscribe! Anyways, our wacky cast of characters get sent to hunt down a monster. character who has the Bloodstone on his back. Spoilers, it's Man-Thing. During this whole sequence of finding and breaking out Man-Thing, there's some good action sequences and tense moments brought through some interesting scenarios. For example, Alyssa killed this dude shooting him through the throat, but in doing so creating a new issue by him making too much noise from choking on his own blood with his mouth stuck open. So when the Viking 2 comes, Alyssa has to cover his mouth in an attempt to stay hidden. This project has some source to it. I don't know what to tell you. Man-Thing CGI is a little shit, but he looks really comic accurate, and the practical effects throughout this film are just top notch. Jack tries to pick up the Bloodstone, but it forces him back. The Bloodstone is a tool that weakens monsters within the universe. It's similar to the ruby slippers in The Wizard of Oz and the Wicked Witch unable to grab them. Of course, we see the similarities to The Wizard of Oz at the end of the film, with Somewhere Over the Rainbow playing a bit on the nose, mate. Jack then transforms into the Werewolf by Night in a very artsy-fartsy scene. The director said how we've seen the werewolf transformation a bunch in cinema, and he doesn't think he can top anything we've seen before. I think the scene is a perfect way to set tension and not make it a CGI mess out of Jack transforming, with bad CGI. It was also done all practically, which is very cool. Action sequence commences with Werewolf by Night killing anyone left from the hunting lot and a bunch of TVA agents. Let's be real, they just had some TVA agent costumes left lying around, and they just thought, fuck it, we'll put those on. Because, let's be honest, why is the historical manor, which has a bloody gramophones as the fucking music players, have guards that look like this? Then they have this one shot which is just chef's kiss. I'm a sucker for one shots. The full hardcore sex scene between the two was an interesting choice, but after Alyssa gave him the sun's getting real low treatment, he got out of it. Literally just walked out the back door. Man-Thing does his thing, and we see that Alyssa is now in charge of the Bloodstone Manor and the stone itself. Whoa, can't wait to see her again. The music starts playing as the color starts coming back to the scene, and for me, it's honestly doing a bit too much. I get the symbolic meaning behind it. Her life was dark and shit, and now that she's killed all her family, I guess she's got color in her life again. But do you really need Somewhere Over the Rainbow as well? Come on, you're doing too much. More Man-Thing doing his man thing, and finally we get the end, just like The Wizard of Oz. This was something fresh for the MCU, and in hindsight, it was very artsy, very well directed, and a cute little story that expands the MCU's darker side, introducing these horror elements. But that's what it's lacking, horror. Not once during this is a single scary moment. There's tense moments, but not really edge of your seat sort of tense. This didn't have to be, scary, but it was marketed as if it was gonna be scary. So those sons of bitches are either pussies because they got scared by this, or they lied to my face. This is also a PG-13. Now, a horror movie doesn't have to be like an 18 plus to be good, but an action horror flick with blood and gore, that would help this go a long way. Not limit the action to more tame slashes and bites. I want to see a werewolf rip those TV agents to shreds while holding their heads up as trophies like they did to the monsters on the wall. That's goddamn cinema. It's like poetry. It rhymes. Also, Marvel's first horror project being its first 18 plus project, that would have got people in seats, even though it was on Disney Plus. That would have got people on their sofas. Marvel has a big array of darker, more horror-esque properties. Letting those projects have free reign, ignoring the PG-13 rating they usually want, would help those stories have actual action and gore and show the viewer that this is a different side of Marvel. I know the Blade film that's never gonna get made struggled with this. They wanted an R-rated vampire killing movie, but some of the higher-ups wanted more money, and limiting the audience via losing anyone under the age of 18 of course would fuck up those numbers. Hopefully with the success of Deadpool and Wolverine, they'll be more likely to let those projects do what they want, and if the projects need to be more dark and the vampire killing type of film, they'll let them be. After we finally wrap up this multiverse saga, I want them to go more grounded. Be smarter with what they're making. Projects that stand on their own while also leading into bigger things. Kevin Feige, if you're listening, just give us fucking X-Men already, alright? Then after you've done that, and you need to do that first and make sure you do it good, then, and only then, chuck in some R-rated projects. Go on. A Ghost Rider who says fuck. A Blade who has blood raves, and make them all get together in a Midnight Suns R-rated movie. Make them scrap Mephisto maybe, I don't know, we've seen him already, so it makes sense. And job's done. You will get people in the goddamn seats.